been published here this week says that your brother is a communist and his wife also.
And
do you believe
how
that?
U.S. is going to know that better than myself, that is my brother and my sister-in-law. I can't tell that they are not communist.
He denied, and he knew that this was not true. He denied the role that communists in his inner circle had played.
In Washington, U.S. officials stood ready to offer Castro economic aid.
Did you ask for any economic assistance?
Not. What happened is that here you in the United States are accustomed to see government coming for money. Not. I came for good relations, for good understanding, for good economical relations.
Vice President Richard Nixon urged the Cuban Prime Minister to hold elections as soon as possible. The people do not want elections, Castro informed him. In the past, they produced bad government.
Nixon's conclusion was that he's probably not a communist, but he is going to be, the phrase was roughly, a man to be reckoned with in this hemisphere. And we have to be very careful.
Cuba's revolutionary transformation began on May 17, 1959, with the proclamation of the Agrarian Reform Law. Las Manacas, the Castro family farm, was the first landholding to be confiscated. Fidel's mother, Lina, was furious and would never forgive her son. "200,000 peasants received title to land they had once worked. On July 26th, the anniversary of Moncada, they descended on Havana to celebrate.
When I first arrived in Havana from the countryside in 1941, everyone treated me with scorn. To see now how the rich, the middle classes welcomed the peasants to Havana in 1959 and put them up in their own homes was beautiful. As if everyone realized that there had to be an end to injustice.
As Castro surveyed the crowd of 1 million gathered on that day, he compared Cuba's new government to ancient Athens. Except better, because Cuba's revolutionary government was not for the privileged classes or the oligarchy. This, he said, is true democracy.
As early as March, I found some pro-Marxist propaganda in a magazine distributed to the rebel army. 1, 2, 3 articles. And we saw Guevara and Raúl meeting with Communist Party leaders. So observing all that, I began to think there's a second plan being put in place here.
Comandante Uber Matos had noted that the Cuban communists were an unexpected and influential new force in the revolution. "Fidel, you are destroying your own work," Matos wrote, resigning his command. Fidel called the rebel comandante disloyal, ungrateful, a traitor, and had him arrested.
This is a critical moment, a defining moment in which the radicals say, this is the direction we're going, and even people who fought with us cannot say no.
Matos's fate seemed a foregone conclusion.
Raúl Castro wanted him executed. Che Guevara agreed, then changed his mind. I said, "Fidel, didn't you say that this revolution wouldn't be like Saturn, who devoured his own children?" And Fidel responded, no, we're not going to execute him. We don't want to create a martyr.
Matos was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Many moderates in Castro's government resigned in protest or were dismissed. Some left for the United States. Others joined an opposition movement beginning to take shape in Cuba. By the first anniversary of the revolution, Fidel Castro had the reins of power firmly in hand. His brother Raúl was Minister of Defense. His friend Che Guevara headed the central bank. An obscure lawyer, Osvaldo Dorticos, was president. For most Cubans, it had been a good year. The price of public services dropped. New public works projects were begun. Rents were slashed in half. And students would soon be sent into the mountains to teach peasants to read and write.
My generation fell in love with that revolution. Popular education, access to health, social justice. And he was so appealing politically, had such an interesting way of expressing ideas.
What I found so fascinating was there was Fidel up here on the podium, making all these strange gestures, waving his arms. There out there are 200,000 plus Cubans for 7-8 hours, while Fidel is up here directing them and enchanting them, weaving a spell over them.
Perhaps his most important accomplishment was understanding the Cuban people where they were and challenging them to do great things. And the Cuban people, at that time, a majority of them responded. They turned their goodwill, their faith, and their judgment over to Fidel Castro. And that was a huge political capital, a political capital that allowed him to, in fact, centralize power.
Soviet Deputy Premier Anastas Mikoyan arrived in Havana on February 3, 1960, to inaugurate a technological and cultural